we're talking about cash flow. I'm gonna go over the different ways I've built cash flow through real estate investing over the years and what my favorite way to do it is in 2025 and how you can start making cash flow with very little money every single month. So let's jump into it. First off, as far as cash flow goes, I always ask people, you gotta have a goal. What is your goal number of cash flow to achieve? And for me, most people, whenever I poll this question, they always say around $10,000 a month is where they would like to start. But as time goes on, obviously you want to make more money, especially if you live in a current place that is expensive like California or New York or even Vegas where I'm at. $10,000 a month, especially with a family and kids, doesn't get you very far. But this is the normal number that I see for most people. And so when we're trying to create a cash flow goal in real estate investing, we got to at least have a method to get there. And so when most people think about cash flow, the first thing that pops into their mind are rental properties. This is how people always think. They say, Ryan, okay, well, if I want to get $10,000 a month in cash flow, I'm going to do it through rentals. And I'm here to tell you this. I've done a ton of different rental properties. I'll talk about Airbnb here in a minute. We've done syndications, we've done apartments, I bought single family. At the end of the day, rentals are good for a lot of things. They're really good for long-term appreciation, right? I'll just put that right here. They're really good for appreciation. They're really good for taxes. They're really good for what we call principal pay down. But are they actually good for cash flow? Well, I'll let you be the judge. We'll just run the math in terms of how much do I got to get in real estate to get $10,000 a month in cash flow. Let's take an example here. If you were to go buy a property out in the Midwest for $200,000 and it gave you $200 a month in income, all right? This is actually very difficult to find in a lot of spaces. Here in Las Vegas, you ain't getting houses for 200 grand and they're definitely not cash flowing. But let's say you were able to find this out in the Midwest somewhere. In order to get $10,000 a month in cash flow at $200 per property, that's going to mean you need 50 properties. Okay. Now, buying 50 properties and finding 50 deals and managing 50 deals is like a whole bunch of work. But on top of that, right? How much capital are you going to need beyond just finding the properties? Well, if they're $200,000 a piece, 50 times $200,000 is $10 million. $10 million is how much property you need in order to make $10,000 a month. And on top of that, right, most loans are going to make you put 20% down, which is $2 million. So when you just run the basic math, okay, $2 million to make $120K per year. All right. 10,000 a month times 12 months, 120K a year. That comes out to a 6% cash on cash return. That's not very good, guys, especially when it comes to cash flow. So here's my point with all this, right? If you're just looking at how can I invest my money to make cash flow that I can live on, rental properties aren't really going to get you there, especially with single family rentals. And this is like a really good case scenario. If you look at properties today in Las Vegas, most of the properties right now, the average price of a home here is around $500,000. That means your mortgage is probably going to be call it $3,000, and it's only going to rent for about $3,000. So a lot of people would say, well, you break even. That's pretty good. No, you're not going to break even. You're actually going to lose a lot of money if you bought this same rental in Las Vegas because you got property management expense, you got vacancy, you got repairs, you got all this stuff. You are literally going to lose money just buying a normal house in a place like Las Vegas or California or wherever else. In most of the country right now, with where rates are today and where prices are today, you would be at negative cash flow. So even using a really good example, it's still very difficult to get cash flow today buying rental properties. Now, that leads to the next thing people always say. They're like, Ryan, well, what about Airbnb? And I'll give you a story. Back in 2017, I bought my first Airbnb property. It was in Big Bear, California. You can watch some of my older YouTube videos. I talk about it. I bought this property for $200,000 in Big Bear. My mortgage at the time was about $1,300 and it was renting for $4,000 per month. So I was making a lot of cash flow. Even after paying the cleaners, the Airbnb fees, the taxes, I was making over $1,000 a month net cash flow. So great deal for me in 2017. I ended up buying about 10 more of these properties because they were such good value at that time. Well, here's the thing, okay? 2017, Airbnb was killing it, right? Well, we go all the way now to 2025, and the game is very different. The laws have changed. Airbnb's gotten way more popular. It's very saturated. It's very competitive. Your property has to be in way better condition to stand out. And, you know, for me, this properties I was buying out in Big Bear, California, they ended up doing new laws that I actually think were kind of targeting me. They ended up doing a law saying that you could only own one Airbnb as an investor. So they passed this a couple of years ago. And so basically, even if you wanted to go build a portfolio in a place like Big Bear, you can't today because of the law. Same thing in Las Vegas. Like Airbnb is almost illegal in almost everywhere here in Las Vegas. So it's very difficult to do because of the law, but also too, the returns aren't even good anymore, right? The same property that I bought in 2017 for this price and renting for $4,000, well, I sold it recently, about 5 years later, and I sold it for $450K. So over 2x my money, made a ton of cash flow along the way, right? And this is the crazy part. The person who bought this home, I'm going to guess their mortgage is probably around $3,000 because, you know, California has higher taxes. I mean, I don't know if you heard about the California fires, but the insurance, all that stuff is crazy. All right. Well, the rent is still the exact same. 5+ years later, actually 7 years later, it's still about $4,000 a month because of competition, because of all that, because of saturation. And so when you start to look at this, after you pay the cleaners, after you pay the property management, the repairs, all this stuff, at best, this property is basically break even. At best. So, and you can only own one today. And this is just my experience buying lots of Airbnbs way before it was popular. Like, I'm just not a fan of it anymore. And I can tell you after owning Airbnbs for over 7 years, I still have a couple to this day. I'm trying to sell them off. Like, it still is like, I'm 7 years into it. The house gets torn up within a few years with the amount of wear and tear. I mean, I've had thousands of nights of stay. You know, all my Airbnbs, I renovated them completely. After 5 years, they're basically shot and they need a whole new update because of how much wear and tear an Airbnb does on the property. So, in the end, I'm not looking to do Airbnb anymore as far as cash flow goes. It was really good in 2017, but man, it's not that great anymore. And I even tell people this with the long-term rentals. It's like, yeah, a lot of people have gotten rich with long-term rentals over the years, but it's like, when did they buy the properties, right? Did it even make sense at that time? And the answer is yes, it did make sense, you know, at the time when they bought properties. I mean, I remember back in 2010, when I first got into real estate, I was a realtor here in Las Vegas. You know, the average price of a home was $100K, right? Your mortgage would have been $500. Well, today in Vegas, same thing. I went over this earlier. It's $500K. And your mortgage is like $3,000, like I said, and the rent is $3,000. So, you know, you're going to lose money on that front. But back in, when it was $100K, my mortgage was $500, the rent was $1,200, there was great cash flow to be made. Problem is, it's not 2010 anymore. Properties aren't at like all-time lows in the last 30 years. Interest rates are way different. Hedge funds are now buying. Everything about it's very different. And so I think a lot of people live in this mindset of, well, you know, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You know, my mentor got rich. He bought all these properties the last 30 years. And yeah, here's the difference though, that I want everyone to be clear. Back in 2010, it still made financial sense to buy that property, even if you didn't get a good deal. If you bought it for $100K and your mortgage was $500 and it rents for $12, it makes sense. It was great advice. Today, I don't think anyone thinks buying a property for $500K where the rent is only $3,000 makes any sense. Doesn't make sense on a cash flow basis. It's very difficult. You're just banking on appreciation and losing money in between. So overall, the point I'm making is when it comes to rental properties, whether it be Airbnb, whether it be long-term rentals, it's really difficult right now. And I'll tell you this too, being in the apartment space, it's really difficult in the apartment space too. Like prices are still really high and cap rates haven't really changed. Interest rates are still high. So it's really tough to do a deal and get one that pencils out. So, I haven't been focused on Airbnb. I haven't been focused on long-term rentals. For me, as far as it comes to cash flow and real estate, I've been focused on the more active ways of doing real estate, but making them passive cash flow businesses. So what I mean by that is, for me, I started flipping houses back in 2015. So, in 2015, as I started flipping houses, I ended up doing 5 deals that year, and those 5 deals made me $50K. Now, I bought 5 deals. I think I sold 3 of them. So, we only saw $50K realized. A couple of those carried over into 2016. 2016, I ended up buying 20 deals. And based on what I sold, I made $200K, right? Now, this is still a very active income business for me. I'm the guy running it all. I'm doing this by myself. 2017 comes around. I ended up doing 50 deals. I made $750K. 2018 comes around. By the way, I have one person helping me at this point. Let's call it one employee. And I'm doing this all on my own with one guy helping me out. He's the project manager, all that stuff. I'm still finding all the deals, everything else. 2018, end up doing 150 buys, end up making $2 million. And at this point, this is when I started doing direct marketing. This is when I started, hiring people. We started wholesaling a little bit, not a ton, but mainly just all house flips. And I would say at this point, I probably had, call it 7 employees. Okay. And ever since then, since 2018, we've always been doing 7 figures a year, in flipping. And, it was great until it wasn't. So around 2020, I ended up getting on YouTube. All right. We had COVID. I started making YouTubes, TikToks, all this other stuff, starting other businesses. And in 2020, we actually did really well. But regardless of that, the market was hot and all those things. The thing that I really learned in 2020 was that I was only spending about 1 hour a week during this time on the house flipping business. At this point, I had spent, the last 5-6 years building the business, and I learned how to build it by myself. I learned how to hire employees, and then eventually I got a COO, hired somebody out to do it, and I didn't really have to do much. All I did was focus on building out great content. I started scaling Wealthy Investor, our real estate education company. I started, doing other businesses, and social media and all these other things started to take off, while this business, the house flipping business, still had a ton of success. So from 2020 to 2022, right, I was very passive in this, and we made millions with the market being so good, with interest rates being low. It was crazy. It was such a great time to be a house flipper, guys. I can't tell you how great it was. But inevitably, that shifted in 2022 when they raised interest rates, right? And interest rates raised, we went from, having 2 to 3% loans to 7-8% loans, and the market went sideways. And I'll tell you what happened to me and how it shifted my philosophy. But one thing I want to make clear is that this form of real estate investing taught me that, for me anyways, if we're thinking about cash flow, passive income, and all that, the best form of income is making money without having to spend a bunch of time. And so the fact is, from 2020 to 2022, I was not spending very much time in this business. I was busy building everything else. And we were hyper successful. And so I was making 6 figures a month very passively owning a house flipping business. And for most people, they wouldn't look at that. They wouldn't say, oh, flipping a house is cash flow, it's passive income. But it is. I mean, there's nothing different about flipping houses than there is about owning rental properties. At the end of the day, you still got to find a deal. You still got to get it fixed up. You still got to manage it to a degree. You're going to have to get tenants. You got to deal with people. It still carries risk. You still have to fix things when they break. You still have to, deal with people. So, if you're talking about owning 50 rentals that make you $10,000 a month, or you're talking about flipping 50 homes that can make you almost $1 million, what are we talking about? One is significantly going to pay you a lot more than the other. Now, look, I understand, okay? Everyone who's like, dude, well, you don't get it. Rentals are long-term wealth and, they got taxes. I get it. I bought rentals too. It's all good. Like I said, I bought every rental type you can imagine. But what I am saying is when it comes to back to the goal of cash flow, you cannot tell me rentals are a better version of cash flow than even flipping houses, okay? It just doesn't exist. You cannot make this kind of money this quickly buying rental properties. It's just not gonna happen. They're a long-term play. Now, I'm talking about, man, from 2015 to say 2022, friggin' to the moon, flipping houses. It was awesome, all right? But when they raised interest rates, it wasn't awesome. I ended up losing millions, all right? Not many people talk about their losses, but boy, was this a rough period. Once the rates flipped, I lost millions because my properties went down in value by like 10%. And so that's usually your margin when you flip a house. And so you got to imagine, this was my situation in 2022. I had about $20 million of debt. This was private money, hard money, etc. And I was paying about $200K a month in interest payments. And so, when your margin on your flip is usually 10% already on, the profit you're going to make, that means I was expecting to make about $2 million on this debt. Okay. I was going to make $2 million on the flips that when they sold. Well, once you cancel out that 10%, now you're just hoping to break even. But here's the thing, because the market was so slow, it ended up holding the properties way longer. And then sure enough, the $200K a month just starts eating you up. And then, properties go over budget. They don't do as well as you thought. Some went down more than 10%. It's a recipe for disaster. I ended up losing millions. Now, thankfully, I was able to pay back all my investors. I had saved up. I had bought enough assets, bought enough rentals. I mean, honestly, to be truthful, I bought up a lot of rentals. I sold a bunch off. That helped cover a lot of my losses. But the main thing that ended up getting me through the storm on terms of real estate investing is that I pivoted my model to wholesale. And wholesaling was the big thing for me from 2023 to 24, and now it's a huge thing for me in 2025. And I'll explain why here in a minute, but it was so important for me to pivot to wholesaling to offset all of the losses I was having here on the house flip side. So for those of you who don't know what wholesaling is, I'm not gonna assume anyone knows, the 2-minute version is this, okay? There's 3 parties involved in a wholesale. You got a seller, you got the wholesaler, this would be you, and then you've got the buyer, all right? Let's say this is me. This is the guy who's gonna flip the house. This is the guy who's going to keep it as a rental, or even maybe who was gonna buy it for themselves and live in it, right? The house I live in today, I actually paid a wholesaler over $200,000 for a deal, crazy. But anyways, here's how a deal works, right? You as the wholesaler find a seller who's willing to sell you at a discount, all right? And you get a contract with them. And let's say the contract is for $300K. Now, instead of buying it like a flipper or a rental guy, you are then just going to find somebody else who's going to be the end buyer. And you're going to assign them the deal. You're going to assign them the rights to the contract. So now, they're going to pay you what's called an assignment fee. And the fee is just simply the difference between what they're willing to buy the property for and what you have under contract for. So let's say this buyer is willing to pay $320K. All in $320 because they know this property's worth over $400,000 when it's all said and done. It's still a great deal, all right? So what happens is they now have the rights to buy it. With those rights, they buy it from the seller for $300K. They in turn get the home and everyone wins. So when you look at this chart, the seller gets the $300K that they originally wanted. The buyer gets a property for $320K all in that they're going to be able to go and sell and make a bunch of money. And then the wholesaler makes a $20,000 assignment fee because they had it locked up for $300 and they sold it to the buyer for $320. And that's how wholesaling works. And people always ask me, Ryan, do you need a real estate license? No. Is wholesaling legal? People tell me it's illegal. It is legal, okay? It's done the same way in 90% of states. The other 10%, you just got to do it a different way. It's not a big deal, okay? But this model transformed my business and really saved my business because when we would lose $100,000 in a month from a flip, that meant I had to go get $100,000 at least of wholesale fees to go cover that loss. In fact, I had to get more than 100K because I got my marketing expense, commissions, all that stuff, right? But long story short, you get the picture, right? The only reason wholesaling was able to save me is because it doesn't have the risk that flipping has, and it pays you way quicker. Wholesaling's great, and I'll tell you how we do it today, which is very different than before. But all that being said, that then led to this whole new thing that I call Cashflow 2.0. And it just dawned on me as I've now been in real estate for over 15 years, like, what is actually cash flow? You know, if people just think that rentals are cash flow, but I'm over here saying, well, I made a lot of cash flow flipping houses over the years. Like, I didn't work that much. You know, my wholesaling business made me a lot of cash flow. Like, even though I didn't get to keep the cash flow because I had to pay off the losses from the flips, if I didn't have those flips, I would have been making great cash flow. And now we're making great cash flow as we enter a new year. But, you know, long story short, I'm like, okay, out of all the real estate stuff I've done, the Airbnbs, the long-term rentals, the flips, the wholesales, the syndications, like, which one's the best? And by the way, which one's the best for right now with the market being what it is? And I just said, well, if I was looking at an asset, forget about whether it's real estate, right? Any asset. It could be Bitcoin, it could be a stock, it could be buying a laundromat, it could be buying anything, right? What kind of features would I look for in an asset? And it became clear to me there was 3 features I would look for. One would be, I want massive returns. If I'm going to invest in something, I want something that gives me big returns. All right. The second thing I would look for is minimal risk. So how do I get minimal risk in whatever it is I'm doing? And then the third one I would look for is minimal time. I mean, I want to get paid quick. So how quickly can I make my return? Those are the important aspects of any kind of investment. And so I started to look at this and I said, okay, well, out of everything I've done to this point, how does it play out? All right. Looking at these 3 factors, how does this play out? And so I said, well, let's take it with rentals. Let's take it with flips, and let's take it with wholesale. You know, how does this play out? And it occurred to me that as I went through it, it became obvious as the best way to create cash flow. You know, do rentals have massive returns? Not on a cash flow basis. We did the math. You're talking 5%, 6%, whatever the case is, right? And some will say, Ryan, well, you can use other people's money and all this stuff. You could, but I mean, still 50 properties to go make $10,000. That, to me, I don't care what you say. That's just not great cash flow. Minimal risk. Nope. Rentals got a ton of risk. You got evictions, you got repairs, you got vacancy. I mean, look, having 50 properties is awesome, but I'll tell you, as somebody who has lots of units, you know, we've bought, 600 units in our syndication at Pineda Capital. When you got properties that are vacant, you still got to pay the mortgage. It sucks. So there's lots of risk when it comes to rental properties. And then minimal time. No, rentals will pay you a lot of money. It's just going to be 5, 10, maybe even longer, many years from now, right? It's not going to pay you next year. It's not going to pay you next month. Like, in order for you to make a lot of money with rentals, you got to wait a long time, many years. So let's talk about flips. Can you get massive returns with flips? Yeah. I mean, flipping, you can make a lot of money flipping houses. I mean, you can go make 50K in the next 4 or 6 months buying one deal. You can make 100K, right? Flips can make you a lot of money. Minimal risk. No. I already told you what happened to my flips. Not good. All right. Flipping is very risky. Minimal time. I'll say it's like a draw, you know, getting paid 4 to 6 months from now, which is typical for a flip. It's not like the long time, like a rental, but you know, it's definitely not super short. You know, it's still going to take at least 4 to 6 months. So what about a wholesale? Well, wholesaling gives you massive returns. Absolutely. I mean, really, when you're wholesaling, the only investment you make is in your marketing. Like, at the end of the day, if you could go spend $1,000 a month on marketing, you could legitimately go make $10,000 a month, $20,000 a month. Like, you could even make more. All right. But my point is, there's not many things you can do where it's like, yeah, I'll invest $1,000 a month into some marketing and some leads, and then I can legitimately go make 10,000. I mean, there's not anything really like that. I mean, if you go buy a laundromat, think about it. With a laundromat, you're going to have to go in, buy equipment, put a security deposit, go hire employees. I mean, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to, once again, maybe make $10,000 a month, whatever the case is. Wholesaling, you could do from your house, $1,000 and go hit the ground running. Nothing else exists like it. Minimal risk. Yep. Wholesaling has almost no risk. Is there risk? For sure. There's risk with everything in life, right? You could get sued. There's risk. But minimal risk? Yeah. I mean, we're not taking on $20 million of debt like I was flipping houses. My risk is just simply my marketing spend for the most part when it comes to wholesaling. And then minimal time. I mean, wholesale deals, you can get paid in 30 days or less. So there's not many things you can go make 20K in 30 days or less. Like legitimately, that happens with wholesale. And so it just became clear to me as I did this, I was like, wow, from a business model perspective, no bias. It's just wholesaling's better. And I've done them all. And in fact, it was only the last 2 years that it finally dawned on me how much better it was because I had, done really well flipping. I had bought rentals and done well, but wholesaling proved as a business model to be so much more effective. And what's crazy too is the way you wholesale now is so different than in the past. And so what I mean by that is when you build a wholesale business, there's only 3 components, all right? Number 1 is marketing. Number 2 is acquisitions. And number 3 is dispo. So marketing is how you get in front of the sellers. A lot of you guys probably wondering that. You're like, how do I find sellers? Number 2 is acquisitions. This is how do I negotiate with sellers? How do I lock up deals? And number 3, dispo. How do I find buyers for my deals? So I'll just briefly touch on these, okay? Marketing. The reason most people fail at wholesaling is because they do outdated marketing strategies, all right? So what you'll hear from people is, yeah, if you want to really make it and not spend money, you should network, find deals and cold call, text people. And look, I'm not here to say these things don't work. They do work, all right? But the odds of them working are extremely low. I've taught people these methods for years, and there's lots of people who've succeeded over the years, right? But in the end, your success rate is so much lower using these methods because they're just really hard to do. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to sit on the phone for 5 hours and cold call people. I'm not trying to hire virtual assistants to cold call for me and then get leads who weren't really that interested to begin with. And on top of that, cold calling is getting far more regulated. I mean, the carriers are blocking calls, TCPA laws. I've been in lawsuits, cold calling. I've had to pay out tens of thousands of dollars. I'm just not a fan of it anymore. I just don't do it. The real way that you're going to win in marketing today and going forward is through inbound marketing. Okay. Inbound marketing is when you put an ad out and the seller calls you, right? So I run Facebook ads all across the country, right? Maybe they'll B-roll one right now and show kind of like how I do it. But we run ads all across the country. And when people see it, I'm basically like, hey, I'll give you a cash offer on your house. And they respond and they're like, yeah, I want a cash offer on my home. And so when we get that lead, they're way more motivated. They're way more qualified. They want to sell pretty quickly. It's very different than networking or cold calling. And you're direct to the seller now, right? There's no middleman. You get the option to negotiate with them right then and there. And so inbound marketing makes wholesaling significantly easier. Now, the thing is, inbound marketing was always expensive, but we have found ways that we can do inbound marketing for significantly cheaper now. In fact, like our students at Wealthy Investor, they use my exact leads, my brand, my leads, leads we've created, and they're closing deals all across the country because it's just significantly easier. So we found a way to do inbound on a budget, all right? And I'll talk about how you got to think about marketing too in the long run here in a sec, but just know, if you had inbound leads, the same leads I got, your chance of success would be way higher, all right? Now, acquisitions. Back in the day, I used to go on in-person appointments for everything. So really, you were always tied to a local market. Well, today, everything we do is virtual. And it's pretty awesome because it's just more efficient to make an offer over the phone than to spend hours driving to a place and meeting with the seller and all that stuff. So virtual is way more efficient, but also I'm actually happy for things like Open Door and Zillow because they've made virtual just more, normalized. So sellers are used to saying, hey, yeah, like what's the offer for the home? If I like it, I'll sign a contract over the phone. So now 98% of our deals are done virtually over the phone. It's way easier. And the cool thing about virtual is it now allows us to do this business nationwide. So I'm not tied to a local market. And so for anybody who's ever thought like, yo, I want to get into real estate, but I'm in an expensive market, I'm in California, or I'm in a small town, there's not a lot of things here. Well, you can now do this virtually nationwide with wholesaling. It's awesome, okay? So acquisitions is way easier. And lastly, dispo has gotten significantly easier. Back in the day, you had to go to meetups, you had to go on Craigslist, you had to really search hard to find buyers, okay? Now, we've got softwares, right? We actually give softwares to all of our students now. And with software, you can literally pull a list of every cash buyer all across the country. And so what we do is, if I'm getting a deal nationwide, let's say I'm, I don't know what zip code, but I'm in Indiana and I have this property in this zip code. I will search that zip code in our software. It's called Wealthy Deals. And in that software, I will be able to just go search all the cash buyers in that zip code and I'll get them all. I can get all their phone numbers. I can get everything. And all I have to do is then send them a text blast and say, hey, I got this deal here. Here's the price. Are you interested? Well, you're going to get tons of responses. These are all people who literally have bought cash properties right next to the property you have. And so it's so much easier to find cash buyers today. Another reason why dispo is way easier is something called novation. I've done other videos on novation, so I'm not going to go super in depth on that, but novation is basically allowing you to wholesale a deal on the MLS. And so what happens is when you can wholesale a deal on the MLS, you can get a retail buyer. You can get somebody who will pay you significantly more for a property than an investor would. I mean, think about it, right? If an investor, might only pay $320 and the property's worth $400, well, somebody's paying $400 for the property. It's just the retail buyer. And so if we could go straight to retail and wholesale it to them, we can make a lot of money. Well, that's exactly what novation does. So not only does it increase our profit margin, but it also allows us to be more competitive with our offers to the seller. Because now, man, I could go lock up this property for $360. It would never make any sense as an investor deal or a wholesale, but because I can novate, I can lock it up for $360, sell it to a retail guy for $400, and still make a good spread. So my point of the story is wholesaling has changed dramatically because inbound marketing is now cheaper than ever with the way that we do it. Acquisitions is easier than ever because it's virtual and nationwide. And dispo is easier because of software's innovations. And the thing is, right, to take this all the way back to cash flow and passive income and everything else, I mean, if you get one deal, okay, I think the average nationwide deal was $15,000. I saw a stat there somewhere, okay? But I mean, if you got one deal a month for $15K, that's pretty good cash flow pretty fast, okay? The other part of this is it's really not hard to start delegating this and making it passive. Like you're gonna have to put in the work initially. Don't get me wrong. And initially could be could be years, right? But at some point, delegating this gets pretty easy because number one, your marketing is already delegated. I mean, if you're just buying leads, it's delegated, okay? Acquisitions, you just got to hire a salesperson. Dispo, you just got to hire a salesperson. Wholesaling is really cool because it's literally just marketing and sales at the end of the day. I mean, all the other real estate investing things I showed you, flips, Airbnbs, normal long-term rentals, they require other skills. It's not just marketing and sales. You still need marketing and sales to get your deal, but then you got to have good operational knowledge on handling construction. You got to be a good capital raiser to go get money to buy the deals. You got to be financeable if you want to go get long-term debt on your properties. Like, there's a lot more skills that are required for those. This requires the least amount of skills and somehow also is the most scalable, the least risky. It makes you the most amount of money. It really doesn't make sense the more I think about it, but it's true. It's just the way it is. So, what I tell people is when it comes to wholesaling, they say, well, what's the risk? And I always say, really the risk is your marketing dollars, right? People will be like, well, what about earnest money deposit? Your earnest money deposit could be $100, all right? It's very, that's not your biggest risk. Your biggest risk is your monthly budget. And so what I always teach people is you got to think about this in a 6-month time frame, okay? If you're thinking about it in month one, I got to make money month one or I can't keep doing this, then don't do it. Freaking keep working your job. You ain't going to make it in wholesaling if you only have a 1-month mindset. Literally, just don't do it, right? But if you can think past 1 month, okay, you can do a lot. So if I was to lay out, these are the months, this is kind of how wholesaling plays out, right? Let's say that, these are leads. And then, you have contracts. I'll just put that there, right? And then you have closed revenue. That'll be another column, okay? Let's just say you were spending $1,000 per month and you got 50 leads in month one, okay? By the way, these are real numbers. For $1,000 a month at Wealthy Investor, we will give you 50 leads per month inbound, okay? So let's say you got 50 leads per month. In month one, what ends up happening is, let's just say you're not lucky. You don't know anything, you suck, and let's say you get no deals, all right? So no contracts, clearly you're not gonna make any money, right? Month two, all right? You're gonna get 50 more leads. But here's the thing, you still have 50 from before. So now you have 100 total leads, right? 50 and 50. And a lot of these people you talk to in month one, you're gonna be following up with. And so what happens is, in month two, you actually convert some people from here, plus you got new leads, plus you're getting better. Let's say you get 1 contract, okay? Now odds are, if you get 1 contract in month two, it ain't closing this month. And this is like I said, I'm being conservative here. A lot of people get deals in month one, but I'm being conservative. So month three, right? Now you got 150 because you get 50 more. And now all of a sudden, you're getting follow-ups from here, plus your new one. Let's say you go and get 2 contracts, all right? And, this first contract you got, maybe it closes, maybe it doesn't. Let's say it does. And let's just say you have the national average and you make $15K here this month. You know what you should do? If you make $15K here, you should reinvest and get even more leads because that's how you're going to keep making money, right? So let's say you, instead of getting 50 this month, you get 100 this month, right? So now you get 250. Your skills are getting better in month 4. You got follow-up, you got pipeline. All of a sudden, you'll go get 4 contracts this month, right? Let's say out of these 2 contracts, one of them falls out, meaning you have to cancel. The other one closes for another 15K, okay? And you just start to see how it starts to stack in month 5, right? So you get another 100, right? Now you got 350 leads in your pipeline. You go get another 4 contracts, right? Out of these 4, now 2 close. You make 30K. Next month, you got 450. You get 5 contracts. Couple of these close. 45K. This is how wholesaling works in a nutshell. If you start getting leads consistently, your skills improve, and you're good at follow-up. This is what can happen. And I've seen way crazier than this happen. But my point is, when you get into wholesaling and you think about risk, your marketing budget is the risk, whatever that is. And then you got to be willing to put 6 months into this because number one, even if you get a contract in these months, it takes months for it to close. Okay. And then you're going to have pipeline that's just building up. And then you're going to start consistently making income because you're building up a pipeline. You have no pipeline and no skill in these first 2 months. So anyways, I always make this clear to people that want to scale a wholesaling business that you've got to be able to have a 6-month mindset, especially when it comes to marketing. Everyone else, when they teach you, they don't think this way because they're like, just network and build relationships. You can get that, but I'm trying to control my destiny, all right? If I know I got leads coming in, I'm going to make money, all right? I'm not depending on other people to bring me deals. If I get them, great, it's gravy, but I want to control my destiny. So anyways, when it comes down to this, right? All that being said, back to our original question of cash flow. How do I go make 10K a month and start paying my bills, and then eventually go from 10K a month to 20K a month to 30K a month, I mean, it becomes very clear to me, okay? Are you gonna do rentals, right? You're gonna go buy 50 rentals and put, have $10 million of real estate and go find $2 million of cash just to make 10K? Not what I would do for cash flow, okay? Airbnb, you wanna go do it with the laws and deal with all that? Not for me, I've done it. You wanna go flip and take on debt? I mean, look, I still flip to this day, but I wouldn't do it. I would build a wholesale business. It's the easiest to start, it's the least risky. And the cool thing about wholesale, by the way, is it leads to all of these if you so choose. Because when I get a wholesale deal, I can be my own buyer and go flip the property. I can be my own buyer and keep it as a rental. I can be my own buyer and keep it as an Airbnb. See, everyone who does these other methods does not even realize they are also a wholesaler because they're sourcing deals. It's just they're the buyer themselves. And so I think everyone should learn to build a wholesale business if you want to be in real estate, because it's going to make you money way faster with the least amount of risk, and it's going to have the highest upside. And then you still get to do all of these things. So anyways, that's how I would invest $1,000 a month to go create cash flow. I don't think there's a better way to do it. And if you'd like us to help you, if you like what I'm saying, you can go to wealthyinvestor.com. We can teach you how to get leads. We can help you with coaching. We'll get you all the softwares. We'll literally give you everything I just talked about. It's very simple. So go check it out, and I'll see you on the next video.